hoping this presentation will give you a peek inside the box, Japanese people's head. And speaking of inside, have you seen the Disney film Inside Out? So there's a scene in the movie when Riley, the main character, doesn't want to eat broccolis. And in the Japanese version of the film, they changed the vegetable to green bell peppers. And can anyone guess why they did this? Well, if you're Japanese, it's really obvious, but it's because green peppers are commonly perceived as the vegetable kids hate in Japan. I don't know why, but it's just how it is. And they also changed the scene depicting ice hockey to football for some countries. And I think this is a little bit more obvious. But did these changes improve the story, or did it add any value to the story? I don't think so. And they're not even noticeable, right? But in my opinion, I think that's the fundamental of localization. Localization is not about adding a new value to the product. Rather, it's about presenting a product in its supposed form for the country. And when the localization is done right, it's often unnoticeable because it feels local. An example of a great localization that feels natural and it's kind of unnoticeable is Slack. In the Japanese version, well, it's not really like a Japanese version, but there's a setting to turn this on and off. But hitting enter, wait, I have a GIF. Hitting enter does not send a message, but it breaks the line. It breaks the text into a new line. And this is a great example of thinking inside the box, because Japanese people have a strong tendency to format the message perfectly before sending it, especially in a business communication. So I think this is a great localization. But what feels more natural to the Japanese people? What sparks joy to them? So of course, I'm going to talk about Marie Kondo. I think many of you know about her from her Netflix series. And actually, I noticed that btrax has an amazing article about Marie Kondo in their blog. So I highly recommend you check it out. So let's take a look at Marie Kondo's YouTube channel. This is what her English channel looks like. And this is what her Japanese channel looks like. Did you notice the difference? Okay, let's go back. English channel, Japanese channel, right? Okay, so I'm not sure if you notice the difference. So I'm going to give you another example. Okay, let's take a look at another example. So here's a film poster for a Marvel film, Ant-Man. I think many of you have seen it before. This is the Japanese version. I'm not going to explain because I think it kind of explains it. So here's another film poster, the Japanese version. And this is my favorite because I feel like this is kind of intentional, like it's something that Tarantino would do, but this film poster, the Japanese version, it's kind of like an extreme case. So overwhelming amount of information, right? And people always say Japanese design is text heavy. Well, I don't like to use the term text heavy because it doesn't explain anything. But I would like to ask a question to the audience. So do you think this is good localization or bad design? Raise your hand if you think this is good localization. And raise your hand if you think this is bad design. Okay, I actually can't see the gallery view, so I don't know who raised the hand. But personally, I think they look ugly. Okay, but of course, there's a reason, right? Why do they do this? So that's why I'm going to explain, and please don't get offended. Okay, so and it's all about customer mindset. Okay, Japan, according to our research, Japan is one of the most distrusting markets in the world. Basically, Japanese consumers don't trust business in general, especially unknown foreign brands. And 56% of the Japanese consumers answered they will take their business elsewhere after one bad service experience. And 56% is extremely high compared to other countries. Another research, 48% of the consumers answered that the quality of the product is the most important factor when choosing a service. And most other countries answered cost effectiveness, but in Japan, it's the quality of the product. So we can assume that the Japanese, it's very hard to gain trust from consumers in Japan, and of course, even harder for foreign companies. And they have a tendency to verify the quality before choosing the product, and especially opening up wallet. Okay, so this is the film distributor's solution to rely on verifiable data, including critics' review, synopsis, number of awards, which works for Japanese audience. And this is just one of the possible solutions. And if we dissect, you can see that they showed Academy Award nomination, Locked Room Mystery by Tarantino, all characters facing forward, and it has like a plot synopsis, 8 characters, all liars, who's going to survive. So you don't even have to watch the film trailer. Like all you have to see is this one poster, and you kind of understand what you're getting, before going into the theater. And for example, it's common for the Japanese company to show the list of corporate customers, testimonials, and pricing. And this looks kind of familiar, right? It's basically the similar strategy as the film poster localization, using information and testimonials and verifiable data to gain trust from the customers. And what about those handwritten pops that you see in retail stores in Japan? So pops are handwritten notes used in Japanese retail stores to provide additional information about the product. And it's basically doing the same thing in a manual way. So it all goes back to the consumer mindset, hard to gain trust, and they want to verify the quality. But of course, providing more information is not the only way. Those are the solutions that film distributors came up. But of course, there are different solutions to that. And in Wix's case, we are focusing on showing the actual users and their stories. Wix is an online platform for creating websites and growing business online. And nothing speaks more about the reliability and quality of the product than the real success stories. So last year, we reached 8th anniversary in Japan. So we chose 8 different users from different industries and asked them to share their success stories. And we made like a marketing campaign out of it, and it performed very well. And that was our way of kind of tackling the obstacle. And well, let's talk about the consumer mindset from a different perspective. This is a completely different example. So I'm going to show an example of a recent marketing campaign done by Indeed. So Indeed's recent YouTube campaign starring Yoshimoto comedians. Yoshimoto is the largest like a comedian talent agency in Japan. Received over 11 million total views, and comedians competed against each other by making unique skit. And viewers can then vote for their favorite skit in a contest format, and the most popular video became a TV commercial. So of course, there are different ways, different metrics to measure marketing campaigns. But right now I'm only talking about the view counts because that's basically like all I can see. So I'm just talking about the view counts, not like an actual success or failure. But I think 11 million total view is a great accomplishment. And around the same time, another company ran a similar YouTube campaign, which didn't get as much view counts. Again, I'm only talking about the view counts. And it was a series of YouTube videos starring Yoshimoto comedians, same casting, competing against each other in a contest format, making promotional videos. Basically kind of the same, same thing. But there were no viewer participation or time exclusivity factor. And in order to understand this, I'm going to show you the transition of marketing trend in Japan. So from the 70s to 80s, consumers valued ownership of the product. We call it mono or product consumption. And from the 90s to 2000s, they valued experience over product, and we called it experience consumption. And from the 2010, consumers valued exclusive experience, meaning something that they can only experience at the moment by participating. So participation and time exclusivity factor is very important, and we call it time consumption. And consumers, especially younger, 20 to 30s, value time exclusive experience over product. And here's a research done in 2018 showing that the younger age group in the 20s value this time consumption much higher than other age group, okay? But what about now? What's happening at this moment? This interest in time consumption is growing in all ages. This research was done in July 2020, and you can see a graph showing that this time consumption interest is becoming really, really high among all age groups, right? Okay, so besides the existing reputation of Indeed and the budget they are spending, like we can assume that they're spending a lot of budget. This is one way to analyze the success of their marketing campaign is by viewer participation. And this is different from, this is different from user participation. They don't have to become a user to participate in this campaign. Anybody, a public audience can participate. This is the really important factor in time consumption. And the other factor is time exclusive experience. So this campaign included both factors, and I think that's one of the reasons why this is really, really successful. Okay, so I talked about thinking inside the box, and I think like think inside the box has a negative connotation to it, right? Like it's kind of like think traditionally, but I don't mean to be closed-minded, and it's actually an opposite. So it's about having a different, confined perspective for the international market. Well, many companies have like one international market manager who takes care of other different languages. And it's really hard to have a different strategy for each market. So that's what I mean by thinking inside the box. Think like, or in this case, think like a Japanese person. And when people mention localization, we say L10N, right? Because everybody in this industry is too lazy to spell it out. So I would like to close this presentation by saying, don't make L10N limitation, but make L10N liberation from single-minded international strategy. And that's the end of my presentation. And if you have any questions or feedbacks or just want to say hi, please feel free to contact me by email, kazu@wix.com, or please send me a message on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm always available. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kazu. That was super interesting. I'm going to take over your screen quickly, or actually, how do I stop your screen sharing?
I think I can do it myself.
Oh, I have so much power being the host. All right. Well, by the way, everybody, thank you. Yeah, now you can actually message to everybody as opposed to just messaging directly to the host or co-host. But thank you very much. We're going to take some questions at the end, but feel free to start asking questions or commenting on the chat. Next up is Brandon, who will be kind of giving a little bit different view of his thoughts on localizing from a design perspective. Are you ready, sir?
I am ready. Yeah. I don't know if I have different point of views, but it was wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. All right, let's see. So let me try to share my screen. I'll be talking about similar topic. Before that, I'd like to quickly introduce btrax. Our vision is to bridge the gaps. And we designed the feature by bridging the gaps. This is the official statement. And some of our clients companies in the US, companies in Japan, we do cross-border, both directions. So we have different kind of projects. Some of the projects going to the Japanese market, we did the very first Expedia website, Toys R Us in Japan, e-commerce, mobile, and Autodesk user testing for their new products. Koala is Australian bed company. We did the initial research and some branding, market entry, and YouTube video development. And Naoto is a B2B, a Silicon Valley startup, specializes in the device in the car. And we did the brochure localization, some of the content of the brochure and digital app and the website. Like Kazu says, lots of text for the Japanese market. Square, obviously, we have Eugene here today. It's wonderful to have him here. We did the market entry, the first branding, and some brochure development, some design elements. Adara is another B2B platform for this data startup in Silicon Valley, and we did the market entry, press releases and events, inviting industry experts. And speaking of events, I spoke at a few events before. This is the RISE conference in Hong Kong. And this is Web Summit, which I got a privilege to talk a couple years ago in Lisbon. And this is former mayor of San Francisco. I'm a part of his team. And another talk session with big consultant from Japan, Omae, Mr. Omae. And this is my DNA test. So I failed to introduce myself. I'm half Japanese. I did the 23andMe testing, half Asian, half white. It's me. So I'd like to jump on to the main topic. So first part is, what is big in Japan now? I'm not talking about these guys. And I'm not talking about these guys. And definitely I'm not talking about this guy. Somebody may know those 80s music anyway. No, I'm talking about these guys, some of the tech companies in Japan. Twitter, Japan is their second largest market in terms of revenue. And they have 45 million users in Japan. And they're very successful because their service itself really appeals to their users in Japan. 140 characters, perfect size for Japanese language. Because if you write something in Japanese, you can tell 3 times more things than, say, you write everything in alphabet. So the service actually was better suited for the market in Japan. And some people in Japan actually use Facebook for their business use. So they separate their private statements on Twitter. So that's Twitter. Another example would be Netflix. They're just 5 years old now, but they make $5 million net profit from Japanese market. And they have 5 million paid users already. And some of the key factors will be they didn't have too many competitors, and they didn't have almost no domestic competitors in Japan 5 years ago. And in Japan, there are only, I guess, 6 mainstream TV network channels, and users need more options. And like a KonMari, a Maria example in the Kazu's slides, they created the original content in Japan. That boosted the number of users there. And Slack, one of the recent ones, they've been around for 3 years in Japan. They already achieved 1 million user base there. The UX is very good, emoji aspect of it. And there are many engineers following well-known engineers in Japan, star engineers. So those are some of the key factors of the success. And this is some of the statistics in Japan in terms of social media and apps. And they're very unique because Line has so many users in Japan, almost like 68% of people in Japan use Line and other social media. If you look up the stats, Line actually has the least amount of users globally, but they have the most number of users in Japan. This is quite interesting. There's contrast for other platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Pinterest. So I would say Japan is a very unique market in this regards. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about the recent trend of this particular app called Clubhouse. Clubhouse is the audio chat app from a startup in Silicon Valley, or San Francisco rather. So currently they are blowing up in Japan. This is some of the statistics. People search TikTok and people search Clubhouse on Google Japan, search in Japan. So all of a sudden, towards the end of January, people started talking about Clubhouse all of a sudden in Japan. It is crazy that they even became the top downloaded app in Japan. This is the stats from January 2021. So it's pretty obvious that a lot of people started using it. And now TV programs cover this craze of Clubhouse. And this particular TV show, I think it was yesterday, talking about the Clubhouse got the new logo. What's the big deal about it, right? But they do, because they got a new logo. Why? Interesting. I thought this was interesting. A rumor goes that there is a particular session by industry leaders, tech leaders in Japan. Those 4 people got a session on Clubhouse on January 24th or 25th. And that brought a whole lot of followers of them coming towards Clubhouse. And social media, this is some of the screenshots from my social channels, Facebook and Twitter. And to be quite honest, I found Clubhouse through my Facebook feed by people in Japan. So I did not know that app before that, even though it's been around for 6+ months already. Some of the politicians and well-known people, celebrities, use Clubhouse. So a lot of people follow them, get on Clubhouse. And this is huge. It's got the invite-only feature, meaning in order to use it, you need to get invited. And if you use the app, you have this invitation that you can send to your friends. Kazu just talked about exclusivity. This particular app does have exclusivity aspect, and since it's a real-time app, it's a concept of time-based real-time consumption of content. Maybe that also appealed to the audience in Japan. And some people even tried to sell their invitation through Mercari, and they did. This particular one says somebody sold the invitation on Mercari for $65, just an invitation, but people pay money in order to get it, simply because they want to use it. Crazy. Another factor is that the app is only available currently on iOS, and Japan happens to be the country with higher iPhone ratio than Android, which is very unique comparing to the global stats, which is like less than 1/3 use iPhone. So this is good news for the app only available on the iPhone in Japan. And another factor is, since it's a voice-based app, you don't have to look cool. You don't have to wear makeups, and you don't have to wear anything actually, because they only hear your voice, or you just hear them. So it's easier to get into the app. And of course, I do have my first session on Clubhouse next week, invited by a friend of mine in Japan, asking me to be a guest speaker to her session. I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I'll try it out and see how it goes.
now we're going to have Eugene. Eugene is going to kick off launching products in Japan during a pandemic. So this should be super interesting. I think we are good to go, sir.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name is Eugene O. I'm a product marketing lead on the Square e-commerce team, responsible for international launches. And just want to say up front, I'm by no means an expert of Japan. And I didn't bring my DNA test with me, but last time I checked, I was Korean. I'm only speaking to you as a member of really a US-based go-to-market team launching a product that I have very little cultural relation to. But what I hope to offer is a view into how we at Square launch in new countries, my own localization do's and don'ts, and how to make your launch pandemic proof. That last bullet point is definitely clickbait. I can't guarantee this at all, but I will share some unique changes we made during COVID-19. So we did launch 2 e-commerce products in Japan last year. Square Online Checkout provides a business the ability to create a payment link for a product or service that they can share with their customers in a text message via QR code as a buy button without needing a full website. And then Square Online Business is our full e-commerce website builder where any business can become an online business. We kicked off the launch in December of 2019 with initial research and launched Square Online Checkout in July. So about 8 months for Square Online Checkout and 11 months for Square Online since kickoff. If anyone's interested in just timelines with how long it took us for this particular launch, there's definitely some delays due to cancellation of the Olympics, due to COVID-19, etc. But this should give you a sense. So what did we do to inform our go-to-market? To give some context, at Square, each product team is responsible for their own international launches. We do have an office in Japan, but they are focused on marketing activities for the Square brand as a whole and not individual products. However, we do still work closely with them to launch our products in Japan. They just aren't the ones driving the go-to-market. In this slide, UXR stands for User Experience Research Team, and at Square, who conducts most of our customer research projects. And our UXR team is based here in the US and can conduct quantitative surveys to Japan relatively well, but isn't really set up to conduct qualitative in-market interviews. So that's where we leverage third-party agencies such as btrax and our own Japan office on some of these deeper dives. So for Square Online, we had multiple phases of research, surveys, and interviews to inform our go-to-market. The initial survey we sent out was to 100 businesses in Japan to understand customer needs and just confirm we had general product market fit. And the second survey we conducted was actually conducted by btrax, which was to do a deeper dive into the e-commerce space in Japan, competitive landscape, customer insights via quant surveys, and customer interviews. We also interviewed our own customers from our beta program, who we released the product to back in June to gain further insights. We also got a lot of input from the Japan team along the way, both pre and post launch. So just a lot of feedback from customer bases and from people based in Japan. And then lastly, I think it is important to just perform ongoing testing and tracking of performance across your various channels. We run our own performance marketing campaigns here in the US for Japan, but we meet with the Japan marketing team every 2 weeks to review results, get their guidance on how we can optimize, etc. And we also do regular check-ins with the Japan teams centered around sales, account management, and customer support. So with this process, we were able to gather valuable insights and learnings, including the high expectation of localization quality and good customer service, insights into Japan's aging population and how we can capture this market, the unique buying behavior for online retail shopping and online food ordering, as well as the use of alternative payment methods to credit cards that we don't really use in the US, such as convenience store pay, bank transfers, QR codes, and even the acceptance of JCB cards, which isn't a card network widely used in the US. And lastly, we gained insight on how to adjust our messaging to make it resonate with a Japanese audience. So what unique actions did we take for Japan? Basically, we decided to retranslate our product almost from scratch, and we pushed for product features that we felt mattered in order to win in this market. We created an entirely new set of marketing assets and education material, and we looked into joint marketing opportunities with local partners. For the marketers on this call, getting the product up to par is the primary job of the product manager, but for the product marketer or the go-to-market teams, their responsibility is to really generate awareness and demand for said product. And so you want to assess what you want to do across your traditional channels like public web, paid marketing, content, PR, and social. So some do's and don'ts that I'd like to cover. One is, the other guests are covering this much better than I can, but a couple learnings is localization really does matter, and you need to really comb through all of your product and marketing assets to make sure that's the case. This is a small but funny example of an error message that in English says, oops, the page cannot be loaded due to a problem, please update or try again later. But in Japanese, apparently, when I showed this to our Japan office, it's like the equivalent to like, or which is more, I guess, cartoonish and not appropriate for business-related settings. So just follow what my teammates in the Japan office says. When we say it's important, we mean it. Next is that real Japanese people matter. And what I mean, I'll give two examples of this. One is in your creative. So if you have the budget, you should really try to use true Japanese models. This is a famous film where a main character on this poster is not Japanese. And what I came to learn was the Japanese audience can really tell if someone on an ad or on a public web page is Korean, Chinese, Thai, or non-Japanese, basically, due to their facial features, skin color, even how they dress. And so the risk you pose is that it can feel like you're not being respectful of that market if you're using non-Japanese models. And if you don't have the budget, just replace all your creative with puppies. This is our highest performing page for a reason. On a more serious note, I think conducting real customer interviews is super important, and don't assume you know their real pain points and use cases until you talk to real users. One example is in one of our interviews, a middle-aged lady running a retail shop pointed out the words that we use for local delivery and coding were not familiar to her and were confusing. And digging in, we found out these were relatively tech-savvy or westernized words, and not all Japanese customers are used to. And then real use cases and quotes from real customers to support your rationale is a good strategy to push for product features that you think are important to capture that particular market. And you find this by market research, competitive intel, customer interviews. Once you come up with an initial hypothesis, test your messaging and value props and learn from your beta customers. It's important as marketers to push for those features that you think are necessary to gain good product market fit. And lastly, I'll just say it's really important to develop local case studies. Kazu touched on this as well, but there's nothing more important than seeing a customer's peers and how they've been successful with said product. So when it comes to pandemic tips, it's a little hard to provide very detailed tips because every business and customer segment is quite different. But some general advice I can give is to increase your marketing success in a COVID world is stay informed, be prepared, and be nimble. for stay informed, just know what's going on in that country. Restrictions vary by region. Policies vary by business type. We learned that tech companies like Square in Japan are still not allowing for employees to go back into the office, but more local companies are much more relaxed, and many employees have been back at the office. Read the news, ask your local contacts, and read customer forums, and you'll find very insightful things from your actual customers. Be prepared. So brainstorm and build different campaigns in advance. What we mean by this is, COVID restrictions can change on a weekly basis, and it can change by region. So you need to be able to adapt your ads, pull creative from your public websites, from your community posts, etc., and just be prepared with different sets of creative that will not be tone deaf to the situation. For us, we have lifestyle images that we use in a lot of our creative, and we have a set with people wearing masks and gloves for pictures when they're handling food, just in case that's an image that we want to portray into our ad creative. And then lastly is just to be nimble. You need to prepare your marketing partners so that they can act quickly and get the right message to the right customers at the right time. So lastly, I wanted to talk about just our experience with virtual events. So with Tokyo still being in a state of emergency, live events is not really happening in state of emergency. It might be lifted in February, but more likely in the spring, from what I understand. And for our launch, we decided to do this, and it was the first time Square Japan has done a virtual press event. And from what I understand, most reporters in Japan are based in Tokyo, so they often have these live press events, and reporters can sometimes go to 3 press events a day, etc. And they were all done live before COVID, but during this time, that just wasn't available to us. So we decided to go through this virtual press event route, and it was actually pretty successful. For those wondering, we used BlueJeans as our technology, but I've heard Zoom is probably the leader in this category. There was live Q&A done via chat, and it was really great. We had our GM, who's based in the US, live stream and do the presentation to this audience. And the main reason we did this was actually a recommendation from the Japan team, where we learned that Japan reporters would rather hear from the person or team who actually made the product, or who were the decision makers of that team or company. And that might mean a US-based executive. So we went with our GM, Dave Rosenko, who's obviously non-Japanese, even though we had the option to go with a Japanese executive in the Japan office. But it went really well. We had an interpreter that did like simultaneous translation. So there was really only maybe a 3-second delay of translation, and it went relatively smoothly. So that's something that you could look into should you do one. I think in terms of either during COVID or post-COVID, there will still be a desire for live press events, but coming out of it, you might see more companies just doing a combination of virtual and live to get the benefits of both. And one of those benefits is just greater reach, but also in our situation, if you did want to have US-based or non-Japanese based attendees and participants, that's more available to you in a virtual event setting. So those are my slides. Just quick takeaways. Localization is important. There are right and wrong ways to do it. There is no substitute for getting insights from real customers. And during this COVID world, you just need to be informed, stay prepared, and ready to be nimble. Thank you. If you have any questions about international launches, you can hit me up on my email or my LinkedIn, and I'm happy to discuss with you further. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. Super interesting and some definitely good insights around launching during a pandemic. One last talk before we kick off the Q&A. Arisa-san, I see you're there. Are you ready to go?
Yes, let me share my screen. So, hi everyone. I'm based in Japan, Tokyo right now. And let me introduce a little bit. So mainly, I work as a freelance consultant especially for the startup in tech right now. But at the same time, I also work for the Shootstar, which is based in Singapore. And that's the video tech company and trying to enter the Japanese market. And I think I somehow ended up with getting or having a Japan market entry professional or no, I mean like specialized experience. And then let me explain a little bit more for the more detail how I ended up with working in that industry. So first of all, so since my father is Japanese, my mother is also Japanese, and then my father works as a teacher. So first of all, I just wanted to be a teacher. That's it. But then like I somehow got the opportunity to work at the Red Bull as an intern, and then this really changed my life. And then later on, I decided to move forward to the business industry, and then ended up with this kind of career path eventually. So I started working. I also worked for a traditional Japanese a company, which is a group of a Sumitomo company, and it was very interesting. I'm Japanese, but that Japanese traditional corporate culture was very interesting. Then like I started moving on to the startup industry, and especially at the Noom, that's how it brought me to the Tokyo. And then later on, Shopify, StockX, and Shootstar. And then the interesting thing is each company, I mean, like some companies are US, but like each company like are very different nationality. And it's even like non-Japanese company, but like still, for example, Canadian company and US company. And I personally, my experience was very different. So it was very interesting for me to work. And also, there are many different kind of size of the team, and especially at the Shopify, I was only one. And it was even before they started the entity in Japan. So even I was a full-time worker, but I started working as a consultant. And then actually people at the Shopify in the headquarters, some people didn't know about the Japanese team was exist. So it was very interesting moment for me to join those companies. So let me show some experiences or life at Shopify. It was very, very fun. Actually, I got a message from Shopify directly on LinkedIn. And while I was attending a Beatbox entrepreneurial tour organized by the Fukuoka city, that's my hometown. And so I was on the train after visiting the Google headquarters. And then I was wondering, I wish I could work for that kind of big international tech company. And then like on a train going back to the city, downtown, I got a message from Shopify, and then it turns out to be this company. And then now it's growing so much. So for more detail, I actually wrote the very detailed blog, although it's all in Japanese, but like you can maybe use a Google translation to figure out what kind of experience I had at the Shopify. And then later on, those experience brought me to the various different work experience as a freelance consultant. Sometimes I also worked on some projects between the US and Japan for the high school student from Tohoku area and so on. And then also it brought me like some other opportunity to sometimes on the TV show like News Zero. It was very surprising, and especially under the COVID-19 situation, I think the freelancing in Japan is also growing so much. Yes, but yeah, I also so I felt like I didn't have enough time to explain everything, so I also created the podcast to explain the how I ended up with this current working style, and also how I ended up with the tech startup company opportunity. So let me talk about the localization a little bit. So it was very surprising that I even didn't imagine myself to work at the tech company, because my major at the university was education, because I just wanted to be a teacher. And then I was learning English. And then I realized that while I was working on the localization at the company, and some people, or even internally or externally, and people sometimes told me that, oh, my friend speaks Japanese, maybe she or he can do the localization. And sure, but is speaking Japanese really enough for the localization? So even like there are many Japanese people, but is that really enough to assign them to work in the localization industry? So actually for me, it really worked well, because I mainly spent more than 20 years in Japan. But because I was born in States, I always try to see the things with a different point of view, a Japanese way and also American way. And it was very helpful, because I was always comparing the culture and language and business and everything. So this is actually the one of the projects I worked on at the Noom. So Noom is a healthcare app company based in New York. And actually their headquarters is based in especially the Chelsea. That's my middle name. And this is also the one of the reason I got very interested in this company. Not only that, but so they're also growing a lot right now, and then they really care about the mindfulness and wellness, and then also helping the people who would like to be more healthy. And so I worked on the localization of this promotion video. And when it comes to localization, not only just translations, but other speaker said already, but we also have to apply the cultural difference or the appearance of even those are the illustrations. So I worked with the American team, and then like point out that like maybe this food is not really considered as a Japanese or Asian food. So maybe we can switch over to the noodle from pasta or we can maybe put the onigiri rice bowl instead of the big pizza or something. And then the copywriting. And so I also created this like subtitle with doing copywriting. And because the Google Translate doesn't really work. If you use a Google Translate for the customer support, it's very not great. So don't use that. But copywriting to sound more natural to the local Japanese speaker is very important, and then have some message. So definitely this is not the direct translations, more like copywriting. And then after that, this is also so at the Shopify, I also learned, so we have so many different teams, international team, and located in Spain or Italy or Germany or India or Singapore or Mexico, so many different time zones. And we had to work with the localization team, and we also have to assign which kind of third-party translating company we should work with. And then when we are trying to hire the freelance translator for the contents localization, and this was very interesting to learn, but the tone of the voice or tone of the language is very important as well. And as even we find some translator or writer, but if they're only focused on for example, sports, maybe their Japanese writing sounds like more sports, or maybe like academic or more technical issues or something like that. So we really have to find the people who can write the actual appropriate the tone of the language, even in writing or speaking. I think this is also very important. And then at the Shopify, this is also very interesting. Actually, at the Shopify, we don't really have a sales people. Not many people don't do the sales, but instead of that, we have partners. Shopify partners are located so many different world, and then they're actually promoting themselves as a Shopify partner, and then that's how they also get the work opportunity. And then some company in Japan, starting from the 2 people, and then actually after 2 years, they grew to the 20 people or the 30 people of the company. And then now they're the one who are leading the Japanese e-commerce industry. So I'm very glad that like each of the company who invested the time for the Shopify really grew. And then they're the face of the Shopify in Japan right now. And also when we started to localize or internationalization of the business at the Shopify, this was very also interesting point of view, because at Shopify at the time, dealing with non-alphabet language was the very first time for our developers. So at the headquarters, there are also the people who never traveled to the Asian countries. So if they know the Singapore or like Hong Kong, some people don't really see the importance of translating or localizing into the Japanese local language. And maybe they might think, okay, like English, Japanese people maybe can still understand the English, but we don't say, I don't think it's definitely like having a Japanese language is like very works better. And for developers, like especially trying to figure out the double byte character, like zenkaku, was very confusing because they didn't know about the Japanese language. And luckily, there are some people who are learning Japanese languages. So it was great because they can educate other developers why this is different, how we overcome this different to localize and our platform and the coding basis. And this blog is very interesting, and this is written by the head of the internationalization at the Shopify, especially the developing part. So Christian, so my boss convinced him to fly over to Japan. It was for the first time for him to travel to any Asian countries, and then he was very amazed. And then our strategy was very succeeded to convince our developer to get motivated to localize and then internationalize our product. So please read this article. And also this article, this is not on Shopify or anything like that, but this was very important, helpful, and to also like promote why the Japanese design is so different than other Western type of design. Yeah, like it's very basic, but like showing the visual and how it's different is very important. And at the Shopify, because Shopify is an e-commerce platform, and each merchant has different aspect or expectation for their storefront or design. And we have to make our platform itself to available or to be fitted to their expectation, even they're from Japan or US States or Europe or Asia, so many different expectation for the design, because many people think this design is good or this design is bad. It really depends on the country. So this was very helpful to understand. And also having a subtitle in Japanese on the original video is also a temporary solution to localize the content. But in Japan, I face so many people asking me that, is your company really investing your resources or time to the Japanese market? How serious are you? Like they keep asking me usually. So having the actual Japanese people located in Japan really meaningful and have big difference for the Japanese company, especially trying to have a partnership with their like with the traditional Japanese companies. So yeah, like this subtitle, even the original subtitle or script says something different. In Japanese, we can really say that we are the best platform or we are better than others. We can say the direct expression. So instead of that, we have to revising the copies and applying the existing business cultures or business rules in Japan, and then so that we can also define the strengths of the service, why people have to choose the platform. And also, I also get asked so many people that like how I found those job opportunity. And sure, the finding a bilingual talents in Japan is not easy at all. Hiring process and especially the commission rate for the recruiting agency is so high. And because now I'm at the part of the shoot start and then trying to hire the bilingual talents. And then like I worked with some recruiting company in Japan, and then they told me that if I try to find a bilingual talent, or if it's very specifically for the tech startup, or even some company prefer to, I mean, we can't really say that, but like some company trying to promote or hire the more female managers so that they can get more, they can fill the gender gap. And then they try to hire the female management positions. The recruiting commission rate is like sometimes 40 or 50% of annual salary. And then I was talking about this to my teammate at the headquarters of the Shoot Star. And then they're very surprised because in Singapore, it's around 20% or at least like less than like 30%. So actually the cost to hire the bilingual talents is taking time, but not only that, but like really expensive. And then how I found those work or job. After working at the Sumitomo Group company, I searched so many different like websites all over Japan, all over the world. And then because I was not really sure what I would like to do the next. And then I ended up with finding this Snoom because they have an amazing investor, and then they have amazing vision and mission and design. I really liked it. And then I found them on Wantedly. That's a Japanese version of LinkedIn to explain it simply. And then later on, Shopify, it's actually direct recruiting from the former head of internationalization at the Shopify. He's Canadian, and then he was trying to find people on LinkedIn. So for him or for the company when they hired me, it didn't cost any money for free. Then StockX. So since I got already connected to the international tech companies in Japan, so there is a co-working spaces in Tokyo, and where there are a lot of international tech company, especially at the very beginning of the stage at the company, they usually based in the co-working space. So I have a good connection with them, and sometimes even after I left the Shopify Noom, I just like visited them to say hi. And then I met the country manager of the StockX in Japan. And then, but it was just after I left Shopify, so I really wanted to do a trouble. So I said, I'm sorry, I can't really take the job, full-time job right now, blah, blah, blah. But surprisingly, they waited for another 6 months. So I was very impressed. And then the StockX business model is very interesting. And then they're the US unicorn company and growing so much. So I decided to join. Then later on, while I was traveling in Singapore, I also got connected to the vice president of the Shoot Star somehow. So I'm not sure if this is helpful, but like there is a certain community of the tech company or international tech company in Japan. And if you're connected to the right people, I think it's real easier and then more reasonable to hire somebody. Yeah, so please check, and especially LinkedIn so far, because they're localizing to the Japanese, so like more people who are trying to use a LinkedIn, even some people are not fully bilingual, but it's still LinkedIn is really working well. So please, maybe you can connect with me, and then you can find another bilingual talents from there.
All right.
Yeah.
We're oh wait, this is your last slide, please.
Yeah,
Go,
sorry.
continue.
Yeah, so let me feel free to connect. So find me on some social media. So that's all from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Arisa-san. Quick question. What's interesting is you all gave examples. One sec, Nina, can you spotlight the speakers for a second, please? And so my question around kind of localization, like that's the focus of the conversation, is each of you have a different experience, like of whether it's your role or the type of company potentially. I mean, 3 of the companies are very similar. When you're trying to localize, whether it's content or product, how has that experience gone? And any advice on how to really impress upon the team? Like Eugene, you said, the Square Japan team, if they're asking something, it's probably should be had, but there's many stories where they push back, especially if it's a product localization or some sort of product update. How have each of you addressed that, and any advice on how to have those conversations, whether it's with HQ on localizing for the Japanese market, or even having a conversation with your Japan team?
I would say getting the feedback from the actual users and customers, because it's really not easy to understand what the other countries' culture and the behaviors. So we always run user interviews and customer feedback questionnaire and stuff, and present that to the clients of ours to make sure that, hey, these are the reactions we are getting from the customers, so we are on the right track.
Awesome.
Okay. Another thing is, we're marketing towards different, countries and markets, right? So you really have to understand the market maturity, because many times, companies starts out targeting one particular market and, decides that's our main focus and decides to go into international market later on. That means maybe the market maturity is different for, say, Japan, right? Maybe you're at the stage of brand awareness and not, something else. So you're gonna have to look at the market maturity, and decide what strategy works best for each market. Because by experience, I think many times companies just localize something like a marketing campaign in English, which is of course targeted towards English US market, or English speaking countries. And of course, the purpose of that campaign might not be the best strategy for other international market. So those are the things that you really have to look into before deciding if you want to participate or localize that campaign.
Yeah, from a product perspective, my advice is to always try to tie your rationale back to business impact. So whether that's identifying the size of the customer segment this would impact, the potential additional revenue this would bring, that's always a really good approach. Another approach is to ground your rationale with competitive analysis. If you can show that your competitors all have this feature, or that you lost deals because of that feature, and you can actually partner with sales to provide that message to stakeholders, that can be a strong motivator on what we need to do to win in the market.
Yeah, for me, so having a number, the actual data is very convincing, and then really need it. So even like I say, Japanese language is very needed to the Japanese market. It's too normal for me and common, but for other countries, people really, I don't see why is that really important. So we need to start a lot of numbers to convince the headquarter or the decision maker to give us more resources or more permissions. And I think using the data and then collecting the right data is also the good way.
All right. Another question, actually, it kind of goes back to Eugene, you guys launching during COVID. And this is kind of reminded me to think about it from each of your perspectives. So I know that, basically consumer habits, you've had to change the way maybe whether it's launched into a new market or created content, you've had to be conscious of kind of how that market is addressing COVID, or how it's changing habits. How have each of you in the last year experienced change in your campaign creation, in terms of localization, in terms of where you're focusing? Has it changed the demographics, the target persona, or anything around kind of those aspects?
Okay, so I'll go first. So Wix is a platform for making a website and managing and growing business online. So of course, during COVID, people wanted to move their business online, and I think the reason that I do localization and provide marketing to people is to let them know that yes, you are able to do it. Maybe easier than you think, and really help people achieve what they want to achieve, and help the business not even growing but maintain. And I think that's a mission as a company, to really help people who needs to kind of establish a web presence during COVID. Yeah, and we don't really use it as a marketing, because we're not trying to sell a product because of a COVID. We just want to let people know that there are different ways to manage and maintain your business, not just doing a retail a store, but you can actually do it online, and there are many different ways. So, and I think it's important as a company to let people know the available choices.
Yeah, for us at Square, even though e-commerce was definitely accelerated overall due to COVID, there were definitely some customer segments that were hit pretty hard, and the messaging that we had existing in market would be very tone deaf if we didn't make adjustments. So like little things about maybe the messaging was about adding more sales than you ever had before, whereas that particular customer segment they were just trying to survive and get out of the red. So things like that, this was more of a square-wide practice back in March/April of just auditing all of our messaging across the board, and then sending out pretty much like a brand new branding and messaging guide to the rest of the organization, so that we can have a basis of how to adjust our messaging accordingly. And that would just be updated, over the course of these few months.
Okay. We're going to do a quick fire now. So I'm going to ask you a question that I see in the chat. You're going to have 30 seconds. We'll give you 20 to 30 seconds to answer, because I want to make sure we get through some of these. Question for Arisa. Have any of the companies you've worked with, or international tech companies with offices in Japan, been willing to recruit from overseas and or provide visa support?
Yeah, so especially at the Shopify now, officially Shopify doesn't own any office anymore. It means like everyone works remotely, and then the Japanese team also is actually hiring some Japanese speakers wherever they're located. And for example, to deal with the time zone in Canada, and then they're trying to hire somebody who's speaking Japanese and based in Canada, for example. So it's really happening.
Okay, thank you. Next question for Kazu. What is currently the biggest challenge for Wix on the Japanese market?
Okay, so this might not be the biggest, but perception of DIY is not really popular among business. Do it for me. Do it for me is much more kind of appealing to the business, because that's what they used to be. That's the business tradition. So in order to kind of tackle that, we want to market Wix as a professional tool for freelancers and web designers and developers, and also using reseller partnership is really important. So in 2019, we partnered with NTT TownPage as a strategic partner, and yeah, if you search online, you can read more details. But yeah, that's one of our focus, and that's how we are dealing with that obstacle.
All right, we'll do one more question, and then we're going to jump into the breakout rooms. Eugene, you mentioned that you don't know the pain points of customers until you actually talk to them. What was the main pain point for your Japanese target customers?
I think Kazu touched on it, but really being able to, not being tech savvy enough to build their own e-commerce platform, and not having the right tools, education, support to do so. So providing that for the customer was a really important insight and aspect to our launch.
Got it. Thank you. By the way, Arisa-san mentioned that holding hands of customers is more common than DIY in Japan. And Kazu, DIFM, right? That's what you wanted to say, it looks like.
Of course, yes.
So, all right, well, we're going to be jumping into the, it looks like, Jonathan, we can probably have less rooms. So if you're looking to connect and discuss some of these issues in a smaller, more intimate space, we'll have about 10 minutes of breakout rooms. And Jonathan, are you ready, sir?
Yes, I am ready.
All right, send everybody away. As is usually the case, we went over and there was not enough time, in my opinion, for the breakout room conversations.
It was good though. I mean, it was there are only like 4 people, and 5 minutes was enough.
Yeah. We have been recording this. We'll be sharing this out. And yeah, thank you everybody for attending. We're going to try and make this a quarterly thing. So who knows what the focus, if you're interested in speaking, or if you have an idea for a talk, obviously Japan, US related, feel free to email or contact myself, john@btrax.com.
Sounds good. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, speakers. Kazu, Eugene, Arisa, Brandon.
All right.
Appreciated
Yeah.
your insights.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Very much.